folks. Good evening. It's almost 10 minutes past 7, and while we've got 80% of our panelists, we're going to get started and hope that last 20%, our first selectman, will be here momentarily. I am Reverend Ted Pardo, the recently retired rector of St. Barnabas Episcopal Church in the back country. But more important for tonight, I've also been a participant on the first Selectmen's Diversity Advisory Committee for a few years, and that's where this idea for a panel such as the one that's come together this evening to explore the wealth divide in Greenwich came into existence. And I'm delighted to have had a chance to work with Demetria Nelson and Bobby Walker and Gabby Ratner. The four of us have been brainstorming this panel for really almost a couple years, and also brainstorming with fellow committee members over that time to get to what we think is a wonderful group here on the panel this evening. Now, we were going to start off with our two elected officials, Fred Camillo and then Steve Meskers, but we're going to ask if Steve might actually lead off tonight, and then we're going to hope that we see Fred before too long, and then we'll hear from him, and then Dr. Mehmet Kansoy, who is with the at Fairfield University. He got his PhD at Boston College in 2018, and then came right on board at Fairfield, and I was pretty interested to see that your research, if I understand it correctly, for your thesis, your PhD work, was technological change and inequality. And so that sure rings a bell for what we're going to be talking about this evening. And then Mehmet is involved with the group that puts together the United Way surveys every couple of years. It's not annual, right? It's every few years?
5 years.
Yeah, every 5 years. And so you can read more about the Fairfield University team that really drives a lot of the data that gets collected and then disseminated. And I know I've seen a lot of people wave this around the town of Greenwich. And then David Rabin, who's well known around here, and Demetria will each round out the panelist presentations. David's got a piece that I bet a lot of people have seen over the last few years. We thought it'd be real great to roll it out, making hard choices this evening, and then Demetria will bring us home. Now, I know, for example, that David's presentation has an interactive degree to it, and we were going to try to have the panelists speak for 10 to 12 minutes each and then kind of move into some questions. But I think it may be best if I imagine all five of you might, or all four of you, hopefully all five, might have some questions arise along the way. So we'll try to be flexible about that and yet keep the evening going at a good measured pace. With that, Steve, would you like to come on over?
So, look, I want to thank the committee for asking me to speak. I think I received the invitation. I was kind of at some level at a loss where I was going to start the conversation. So I've been the first Democrat elected in town, and my district, and I think the important and noteworthy issue is my district covers the entire shoreline of Greenwich. So within that construct, I probably have some of the wealthiest communities in town, and I have probably some of the most economically diverse and constrained or economically limited parts of town. So within that construct, I have, of the housing authority's properties, I have 4 of the 5 of the housing authority's projects, right? Where people are seeking economic opportunity. The town, or through the state and the federal government, we provide some resources to them in the sense of housing and assistance on housing. Now, that district is probably the most economically and ethnically diverse within the town. So the numbers that I have here are in the demographic profile represent where the town is on on its data in terms of the breakup or breakdown of the economic gender and ethnic diversity of the town, right? And you see here that we're a fairly diverse town, people not recognizing that away from us. You know, the reputational expectation up in Hartford is that everybody in Greenwich is driving around in a Mercedes, right? And I think the numbers that David, I don't know if he's going to, I assume he'll bring that through in the presentation, you know, the ALICE number, which is asset limited, income constrained, is on the order of 28% for the town. So those are people who are living on the edge, if you will, in that their income levels are barely affording them food, gas, housing, and they're potentially a car accident, a flat tire, or an illness away from a housing crisis or a food crisis. So I think that's super important when we think about this town, that we recognize we are one, a very diverse town, but there are real economic needs and economic problems and limitations in town. Now, I think the most important thing I could mention, or I would want to point out, is that we have a number of groups here that provide a tremendous amount of support to the community. I think I see Bobby Walker in the back. Bobby Walker was a big supporter, proponent, and ran the Boys and Girls Club and helped provide the community with a tremendous amount of outreach to a good portion of the community in the western part of town, where most of the economic diversity resides. Right. We also have Gabby Radner, who's now at Barbara's House, as they call it, which is also doing the same thing. They're dealing with people, with kids back to school. They're dealing with all of the educational programs, the after-school programs, trying to work on both the economic situation and the achievement gap. So there are people in the town that bring things forward, but the challenges the town faces are going to continue, and they're going to mount, because with a population that's that constrained at 28%, the cost of gasoline, the cost of housing, which is going up, cost of food and inflation, and you know, there's a very limited increase in the minimum wage. So wages are not keeping pace with the level of inflation. The wages on an inflation-adjusted basis, the minimum wage, which I think was established in the 50s, I think the minimum wage on an inflation-adjusted basis would be close to $22 an hour in constant dollars, if we were talking about a minimum wage that was providing an income, right? So we've got a lot of constraints and a lot of problems that we deal with. Luckily, at some level, we have a great level of private sector nonprofits involved in helping our community, but we've got more to do. And at the state level, we've been relatively active. We moved forward. You know, we've kept sales tax off of all food products. We've initiated an earned income tax credit, which is basically a payment to families below a certain income level. So we're helping to close the poverty gap from that. The feds have done something at that level too. But once we're finished the pandemic and the Arpa money, I think there'll be questions about how constrained are the people at the bottom end of the income scale, and what else can we do for them. Additionally, I think the outreach on the achievement gap, which I think when you have dual family incomes at lower income levels, and you had a pandemic and remote learning, I think the gap was probably accentuated in the performance in the schools. And it's going to be very important that we work and do something about the achievement gap. Because if you look at most of the figures, there is a huge and disproportionate performance on income as to whether or not people have managed to get through high school and college. And the earnings gap is dramatic. I think I have that in this folder. How's it? I think there, and I think we go right below. The income levels for the median household income. Now, the median household income is an interesting number because when you look at it, it's not the average. It's literally the median. So I went and looked it up because you always hear people talk about averages and median. 50% of the people in those categories are below that level, right? So female with no husband present, median income is 79. That means that half are below 79,000 and raising a family in Greenwich. So think about those constraints, right? Female living alone, that's 50,000 at the median. That means half are well below that. So when you look at the price of rent, you look at the cost of food, you look at the basic cost of life, and you get a tremendous amount of income disparity and poverty, right? So I think the data here is what the school enrollment and degree estimates across the town, and the types of jobs they're in. And this data, I will make sure it's available to all of you. This is demographics that actually, and educational achievement for the population. And importantly, their income levels, median income for populations 25 and over with the level of education. And I think there, I think here, high school diploma or equivalency, median earnings is 29,000. Some college 44, bachelor's degree, 97,000 as a median. So 50% of the people at this level of education are making below that amount. 50% with the bachelor's are making below that amount. So if you're making 60,000, you're not out of the game. That is part of the median is the split point between upper and lower rungs. And just think about what that means in terms of the future of their family, their ability to provide. So I think one of the things I look at for our town that's very important is the effort we make in that achievement gap and in closing that gap. And that's going to be a combination of food security. That's going to be a combination of after-school programs, enrichment, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, those are the key words. If you really are trying to build a more just and noble society, you want to have that diversity, you want to have that equity, and you want to have that inclusion. Because anything else leaves us, I think, as a group and as a society, impoverished. And I'll leave you with my last note. So I covered Latin America for 35 years. And I spent my entire life on a train reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and focused on emerging markets and as a bond salesman to big institutional investors. And I come up to the Capitol and I have the job, and I've run the job for 2 years, and I meet many of the people I mentioned before who are doing so much good work that, you feel embarrassed. You feel humbled because you look at what you've accomplished, you say, these people and what they've given back. But into my third year, I guess, the beginning of the pandemic comes. I have a cousin, a relative who's at National Institute of Health. I have someone working at the CDC. The COVID is booming. And I'm sitting down in the speaker's office, and we're talking about closing the schools. And the conversation froze. And I was dumbfounded why it froze. And the first tactical and logistical problem was the school lunch program. And I was dumbfounded that in the country that I love, with the people that I admire, that we were having a problem deciding what to do because there was going to be absolute hunger on that. And I noticed as I think about it, the other person who wasn't here tonight, and I believe she's away, was Margaret Goldberg, who's with Neighbor to Neighbor. And I received a phone call from them about the issues about the scarcity at the food banks and the lists of food available. And, it woke me up to an issue where I should mention it, which I hadn't, there's over 500 meals delivered from Neighbor to Neighbor. I don't know what the number is, and I have to find out from Meals on Wheels. But the food insecurity in this town is real and extant, and we have to be conscious of that. And the idea that my state, one of the wealthiest states on a per capita basis in the country, wasn't sure if they could close the schools in a pandemic and a health crisis, because they had to first figure out how they were going to get those school lunch meals to the families. The other thing I'll leave you as an anecdote is there, because I speak more than one language, I was out canvassing, and there was a young individual who I engaged in a dialogue. We spoke, blah, 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 and she stopped me. This was going back 2 years. She stopped me and she said, I need you, and because we could communicate in her native language, there was a comfort level, and she said, I need you to help. And I said, what's the issue? She said, I got taken off the free and reduced lunch program at the high school. And I sat here, and it's not a criticism. I was overwhelmed that a person I didn't know, who I was meeting for the first time, would basically say, I'm hungry and I need help, and I need to figure out back on the list. Now, it was addressed, and it all got taken care of, but if you walked around up in Hartford, you walked around with your friends, Joe, if you walked around with your friends on Wall Street, and tell them there are people who are go to bed hungry in Greenwich, they'd look at you like you were a lunatic, right? And I think those are the types of things we have to acknowledge, that there's a lot of work to be done. So, without further ado, I'll let the people who've been in the trenches for so long speak to it. But you can count on my support. You can count on, I will do everything from the state side to help, bring things forward. And I've got the same breakdown for my district in demographics, and Demetria, you can feel free to circulate all of that. All right? Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. We have 5 events between 4:30 tonight and 9, so I got 2 more. So I'll probably have to leave in a few minutes. But several months ago, Bobby Walker had reached out to me about this possibility of doing an event about the disparity in wealth and income in Greenwich. And it was something that appealed to me because, as you just heard from my friend Steve, there's a perception around the state and the country that everybody here lives behind gates. And as somebody who grew up here in town, very blue collar, whose grandmother lived in Armstrong Court, and I spent lots of nights there. It's a very, very diverse town. It's a very caring town. It's, as a state representative for 11 years, I visited most of the 169 municipalities. And there's no town like Greenwich when it comes to civic involvement and pride. So, and nothing really could exemplify that than when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, and I got a call from my friend David Rabin, and I'd run for office on this thing about public-private partnerships, P3s, and we had lots of these plans, and David said to me, you're never going to do a more significant and important P3 than what I'm about to ask you. And what he said was, the country was shutting down, the world was shutting down. And he said, there's kids who are in school that rely on that lunch for their meals and don't have any other way to eat during the day. And think about that. There are actually people living in town here that rely on that free and reduced lunch. And I thought about it, and a lot of their parents had lost their jobs. They had nowhere to turn. And this was right before, literally a couple weeks before we had Zoom. Right? We were experimenting with Zoom. I didn't know what Zoom was. And so we went right to the BET and asked for $100,000. And Dave said, we'll do 4 times that. He did like 8 times that, but ultimately. And people went crazy. Like, you got to go to the RTM for that. And we didn't have time, right? And I survived a censure on the RTM for doing that. But it was the right thing to do. And I really credit you, David, for having that foresight. And what you did there was unbelievable. But it was the right thing to do because we had never, I always tell people my great-grandparents died in the pandemic of 1918. Italian immigrants, and they were living in Koskov. And, we don't have much information from that pandemic, right? There was no Google, right? There was no internet. So I did a lot of reading. I knew a little bit already, but I did a lot of reading, and it was we didn't really know when we were going to meet in person in the middle of March of 2020. And it just showed you that even in Greenwich, Connecticut, the greatest town in the world, not just the country, the world, still has issues. Right? There's 63,500 people here. Lots of people go to bed. Will go to bed tonight, not knowing, right, what next week brings because they struggle. And coming from a background where, not everybody had a lot of money in our family, you kind of get that. But there was people a lot worse than me that didn't. My dad grew up in Chickahominy, and every year they had to move from apartment to apartment. They had no money. My dad, who was a Marine Corps drill instructor, he didn't have a lot of money, but he gave me a life. I didn't have to worry about where I was going the next year. He did. And that's, Steve, and I know, everybody else is going to say that those stories are more common than you think here in Greenwich. And I thank God I live in a town like Greenwich where people care. They really do. I see Selectwoman Janet Stone McGuigan. Right? We have so many people applying for our boards, committees, and commissions. What a great thing, right? People who have resumes that are off the charts. Like, I wouldn't even apply against these people. They are great, and I would never stand a chance. But they're giving of their time. And so we have to make some really difficult decisions. But we tell people, if you don't, we're not picking you for this. There's so many other ones that you can do. And again, what a great position to be in that we have that. We have great organizations like the United Way, like Neighbor to Neighbor, Margaret Goldberg, we have Dimitri and Elsie of our Human Services Department. They do a tremendous job. I text her, email her, within seconds she gets back to me and is not only I'll see if I can help you, I'm on it, she says. So it's a wonderful position to be in and a wonderful town to call your home. But it's not without issues. And certainly, again, Bobby, thanks, and everybody for putting this together, because it's always good to remind ourselves that we live, despite being surrounded by great wealth and lots of amenities that most people would dream about, we still have everyday common problems. And at the end of the day, we all, without your public health and your public safety, nothing else matters. And so I think we focus on that. We have good advocates on the state level with our state delegation, who are always working to have our back up there. And I think, Steve and I talk every day just about, and it's to me, it's why I get up in the morning, because I know without them, I can't do it. And without you, we can't do it. And it's a great team effort, but just remind ourselves every single day that people here, like every other town in the world, the country, and the state of Connecticut, they have some issues. And so we're not looking to have a system where people are always looking. We want to put them in a position where they can actually help themselves. And a lot of those people that I grew up with who had nothing, families had nothing, got a break. They got a scholarship. Excuse me. They went to some schools that they couldn't afford. And a lot of them were successful, and a lot of them came back and gave back. And if not in Greenwich, to the communities that they live in. And that's what it's all about, is the old saying that was told to me in COSCOP growing up: give and forget, receive and remember. That's our motto: give and forget, receive and remember. Thank you, and thanks for all that you do.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the town. Thank you, Demetria, for inviting me. I've just realized, as people have been talking about them, that I actually interviewed many people in the room. We've been working with the United Way for a while, and it's a privilege to be here talking to all of you. I decided when Dimitri invited me that, and then we talked about the format a couple of months later, that I would try to do a bit more of a bigger picture stuff. Why are we talking about wealth and wealth disparities? Because as I'm sure David will do too, like getting data on the town is something we did very well. They have a whole report on their website that we put together. So I'll start talking about bigger picture stuff, then I'll mention the town briefly, but I'm happy to answer town-specific questions because I work very deeply on that report. So why do we care about health disparities, right? Like, that's the big question. Why is this not a panel on poverty and inequality? Why do we care? Why is the word wealth in there? On the one hand, like, it's interesting to me personally as an academic because we've spent decades studying poverty and people that do without, and understanding wealth as an object of study is important. But on the other hand, we don't really care about it for its own sake. What we care about wealth disparities is their consequences. And one of the biggest consequences of wealth disparities in the United States is the decline in social mobility. This idea that people are not constrained, should not be constrained by their circumstances at birth, that if they have the necessary merit, if they're willing to work hard, if they are smart, whatever your criteria for that might be, that they can move up in the world, make more money than their parents. Now, as you can see on this graph, I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but the gist of it is, this was broadly true for people born at different levels of the wealth distribution for a long time, right? Like in the 1940s, which is that top line on the black there, people born across the wealth distribution tended to make more money than their parents. So this vertical line is the percentage of people that made more money than their parents. The horizontal axis is how much money their parents were making compared to everyone else. But as you can see, over the decades, that trend of people making more money than their parents, being able to move up in the world, in other words, has been declining pretty dramatically. So one of the drivers of this has been the concentration of wealth in the United States. The second reason we care about wealth is because focusing on income alone, how much money people made last year or how much money people made 2 years ago, really doesn't do the problems justice. So what you're looking at here is what happened during the last great financial crisis, during the Great Recession. And you're seeing two trends here. So the blue bars are the median income across the United States, so how it changed. And what you're seeing is over here, the median income was around $70,000, and then it went down quite a bit. The gray bar you're seeing is the top 1% income, the threshold above which you would make the top 1% income. And you can see it also fluctuated a lot, right? So you could be inclined to say, well, incomes of everyone went down, so all boats rise together and sink together during crises. But when you look at it a different way, the financial assets, in other words, the wealth that people control other than real estate is a big one too, obviously. But it was a housing crisis, so let's put that aside for a second and let's look at what happened in financial assets, what happened to people's wealth. You're seeing a very different picture, right? The green bars, everyone, the median income fluctuates and drops pretty dramatically after the crisis. The gray line stays relatively flat. So people that had a lot of money were able to hang on to it. So this is why we care about wealth, because it's not as, it doesn't fluctuate as much as income does, and it allows us to see inequality getting baked in other words. So that's what we really care about. So this is median wealth of American households based on their educational achievements, as you can see. And what we're seeing is quite dramatic, right? Like incomes were very dramatic too here in town, but wealth is even more so. So again, these are numbers that indicate the 50% point. So for people without high school diplomas, their average median worth was around $4,700 2 years ago. Half of those households had less money than that. So that's why we care about wealth itself as an explanatory factor, why it really matters to understand that. Now, what does it mean that wealth bakes in inequality over the long term? Well, getting the credentials to climb up in the world, right? Like to get the graduate or professional degree, the bachelor's degree, or whatever other credential you might imagine, takes some of those resources. And households that already have those resources to spare get those credentials much more easily. And people, what I like to tell my students is, being rich tends to be a very sticky thing, much like being poor. If you are there, you touch it, and like a fly trap, getting away from it is very, very hard. That's the effect of wealth. You get to bake in those inequalities over the long term. So, why are we talking about all this top line stuff? Especially when most of what we can do is like really big picture things, right? Like if you listen to TED Talks about wealth inequality, they'll talk about things like, oh, we need to change our tax policies. We need more financial transparency so we know who has how much money in the Cayman Islands and stuff like that. That's not for this venue, but it's really important to realize when those things don't get fixed, other bad stuff tends to happen, right? We are living through a period of relatively mild inflation. In extremely unequal societies, that inflation can run away very quickly and can cause widespread devastation, even though eventually it tends to help inequality, it tends to reduce inequality. In other societies, war tends to be that equalizer, right? Like great inequality tends to result in devastating wars, and when all the real estate is flattened and financial markets are bombed out, everyone becomes equal. That's not the type of thing we want to do. Or in countries like Russia or China, the extremely rich get expropriated, right? If you were watching the news a couple of months ago, the founder of Alibaba disappeared for a couple of weeks, came back, and half of his money was gone. So these types of things tend to happen. They're not great solutions, so it might make sense to think about these bigger picture stuff. But for our purposes, we need to do two things. We need to acknowledge that this is a very relevant problem. So this is the first of two images I'll show from our report for United Way. The first selectman and the congressman talked about how the disparity is very real in town, and I would like to commend them for recognizing that. It's a very important thing to acknowledge its existence. So what you're seeing here is what percentage of households are occupied by renters in town. And what you can see is a clear division, right? The 95 corridor is a corridor occupied by renters, and the rest of town is mostly dominated by homeowners. Again, real estate being the biggest part of assets that American households hold, this tells you a story of that disparity. Here's the second map I'll show you, which is the percentage of people receiving public assistance. We see that same division, right? The 95 corridor, where people that are in need of public assistance, or people, I should say, people that qualify for public assistance, a lot more people need it than that qualify for it, are concentrated, and the rest of the town looks very different. So why are we talking about this? What can we do about wealth disparities at the local level? Well, I've been racking my brain about it since we talked with Dimitri about this, and I think it makes sense to focus on a couple of things. The town of Greenwich is not going to levy heavy taxes and reduce wealth inequality by taxing it out of existence. That's not how towns work. But what the town can do is to fix the problems it can create rather than focusing on the wealth disparity itself. So focusing on programs and policies that would improve social mobility, such as providing more affordable housing, maybe denser housing. I know the town has been working on it. I also know it's a very third rail issue in many of the towns in Connecticut, but it's a very real concern. So remember, in this map, this is the renters map again. Vast majority of these households spend more than 50% of their income to pay that rent. So there is a real crisis there when people that can't afford to buy in town also really can't afford to rent in town. So housing is something to focus on. Education, we interviewed so many people working in the education system. The town has an amazing education system, but investing further in it, expanding maybe the free and reduced lunch program, doing other types of wraparound services, which is really the preferred way of thinking about these issues these days, so that people do not have the anxiety of whether they will have food security, whether they'll have transit to work or to school, whether they'll have childcare. Childcare was a huge issue that came up on our report work because as much as you can offer in America, you do not have enough childcare in any town. And it's a really important thing that allows parents to work. As the proud parent of an 11-week-old, I can't tell you how much anxiety it causes me and my wife. And again, it's a very different picture when you're not making the salary of someone who has a graduate degree. And even simpler things like infrastructure investments, making sure that like sewer systems work and don't back up, making sure that power is uninterrupted. Not that these are huge issues in the town here, but understanding how important it is to have accessible, reliable, and destigmatized public services can be to improve that social mobility is really critical. I'll wrap up here for now. I'm happy to chat further in questions, but I know we have a lot of speakers to get to.
Please use the mic. Oh, okay. You know, I'm not a podium guy. Just going to walk around. So, all right. So okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Anyway, that there's an $8 return for every dollar invested in a program like that because you give these children, you set them up for success. If anyone wants to chat about that, I'm really happy to do that, of course, because that program, we have the 3 years worth of data now from Greenwich Public Schools that proves this two-pronged approach from birth to 5 is successful for these at-risk kids, which are the people we focus on, the federal poverty level and the ALICE population. One other thing that I wanted to mention, when Tony Jones, the superintendent of schools, started here 2 or 3 years ago, she didn't know the landscape, and Fred had said what the Greenwich United Way did. We raised $900,000 in about 6 weeks for COVID-19 relief. And we had a conference call before that Zoom thing, really, anyone knew what that was. Conference call weekly, connecting many stakeholders in town, 30 to 40 a week. Some of you were on it, Tony being one of them. We made that connection so those kids got that food delivered to them so they didn't go hungry. Free and reduced lunch. Joe Kelly, you probably know this number pretty well. About 25% of the children, of the 9,000 children almost in the Greenwich Public Schools are on free and reduced lunch. But if you take out the 4 Title I schools, AMAV, JC, New Leb, and Western Middle School, and they're all on the western end of town, someone put their hand up. What does that number jump to? Anybody want to take a guess? Just take out those 4 schools.
I mean, those schools as the number, probably north of 50.
Like 60 to 70%, yeah, on free and reduced lunch in those schools, okay? Some staggering figures. Anyway, let's get going here. So Alice, who wants to tell me what a family of 4 needs to earn in this town to survive? This is a survival budget, nothing to do with federal poverty level. Family of 4 with 2 children in childcare, which is a common dynamic. Anyone want to take a stab at what that amount is that those 2 parents have to make? Someone yell it out. That's a good guess, but I must have told you that one time, Tara, because we talk a lot. Ringer, yeah. Anyway, that's awesome. It's about $115,000 a year. Now, what does that mean? That's rent, right? That's child care, which is really expensive in town, transportation, food, and other necessities to survive in the town of Greenwich, okay? So we're going to start this Making Tough Choices demo, and I would recommend if you have kids who can understand this, to go home and do it with them at some point, because they will learn a lot about about what it means to be that falsehood that Greenwich is paved, every street is paved in gold. It's not the case. So we're about to walk through the shoe. We're going to go through a month in about 5 minutes, or a little more, in the life of an Alice family. Now these numbers you're going to see are not Greenwich numbers. I just gave you the Greenwich numbers. They're Connecticut numbers or Fairfield County numbers, Connecticut numbers, statewide. So this is a program that about 20 states or 25 states in the East mostly of United Ways banded together. All the data comes from Rutgers University. So let's fire away here. Let's take the challenge. So, as I said, that dynamic is common, right? 2 small children, 1 infant, 1 preschooler. We lost one of us lost our job, but we have one of our partners is making $2,000 a year. But we have a job potential. We have 3 job opportunities for us. We're going to go to the next slide for that second parent. So we're going to choose our job. We have $2,000 in the bank right now. You can see the days of the month are going to click off here, which you can't really see all of it. These are the 30 days of the month, and we'll see that in a second. So I'm going to take the first one who shouts out whatever that first job, is. You tell me what should that second caregiver take as their job. And Danielle, if you go click through this arrow, yep. Okay, that'll get through the selection. Anybody take a quick look? Tell me which one you want. And as you choose different ones, by the way, the algorithm behind it changes, so you should do it a few times if you go home and do it with your kids. So what's the occupation of the second caregiver? Anybody?
Nursing assistant.
Let's pick a nurse. Okay, let's pick it. Okay, so we know that the folks who work third shift jobs have inconsistent schedules and often faced with difficulty finding childcare and transportation, which we know are big expenses as well. We can learn some more, but we're going to let you do that at home for sake of time. So look at our balance. We chose our job. Now, where are we going to live? Now, you know that these prices here are not Greenwich, Connecticut, right? Everyone's laughing because we know that. For any of these things, it's going to be probably north of $2,500 a month, $3,000, $3,500 a month. So let's keep that in mind. But let's pick where we're going to live now. First one that shouts it out will live there. Apartment rental one, $1,500 a month. Okay. Balance goes down to $1,347. We know what housing burden is because Mehmet talked about that a little bit. And all this information is on our website in the needs assessment that we do every 5 years. Take a look at it. So the housing burden is massive for these folks, okay? Meaning that they may have to not buy the food they need or maybe not do other things that they need, right, to survive. We're going to go on to the next one. Okay, another big one in the budget of an Alice family is the child care. Let's scroll through those. Danielle, which one do we want to pick? Now, you can see that our balance in our bank account, if we choose one of those, we're busted on the third day, on the day 3 of the month. Friends and family. Okay, let's go with that. It's probably more than 25% of the household survival budget for Alice families, because in Greenwich, the Greenwich United Way has surveyed all the child caregivers in town. When I say that everyone has just gone up this year as well with everything that's gone up, $2,000 a month for one child is about the average in Greenwich, by the way, and continuing to go up. Let's go to the next one. So now we have to get around, right? So let's keep in mind our balance, and if we're going to choose a car, insurance and gas, or we're going to get around with the bus. And we all know that the transportation in the town of Greenwich is difficult at best if you don't live near the bus line on the Post Road or wherever else it goes towards Railroad Avenue and around the train station. Someone shout out how you want to get around. We have to choose the bus, right? Okay. Again, I just told you about the limited public transportation in Connecticut, especially Greenwich. Difficult to get around to do the daily chores that we take for granted when we pick up our keys and get in the car, right? Okay, we have $600 left. We have to eat now. Got to feed those darn kids, right? We pick anything besides low cost, we're out of cash. So we almost are forced to go with low cost. Now let's pick low cost and see what happens there. What happens to your health? What happens to your well-being when you're eating that low-cost, crappy food, right? Well, let's click on Learn More, by the way, on this one. This is an interesting one here because some folks make too much for SNAP, right? That $115,000 is too much for SNAP benefits, which is a supplemental nutrition program formerly called food stamps, in case you didn't know that. Close that out, Danielle. Okay, so we'll continue. We're on day 6. You guys are doing well. Holy smokes. Now what do? Stove broke. Can't cook, except for the microwave. Landlord can't get there for 2 days to fix it. We go out. We have sandwiches. Peanut butter and jelly. Okay, that. Remember the name of this exercise? Anybody? Yeah. Making tough choices. So we're gonna wait. We went to the next.
Sorry.
Oh, don't go back. We're okay. So, did you pick? I didn't see which one you picked.
Sandwiches.
Okay. Okay. Good. So, here's a tough one. You've got these 2 children who want to do things, and you're in the town of Greenwich, and you kind of have to have them do things. Which one do you choose here? Did the payday pop up, by the way?
It did.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. because my back was turned for a second. So we did get paid, so we're back up to $1,000 now. Do we pay for the lessons, or do we wait till next year? Let's pay for the lessons. Let's let the kid swim. Good. We'll take him to the YWCA. We'll let him swim. So now I have a little carpal tunnel, I think, right? It's interfering with my ability to do my job. Do I go to the doctor? I'd go and get a splint at the drugstore and hope that solves the issues. Shout it out. We'll get a splint, and hopefully that works. You know, healthcare, we know how much that takes to bite out of budgets. A lot of folks go to the, okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, it's all right. It's her first time, it's okay. Because we chose family to watch our children, mom is sick. I don't have daycare for today. What do I do now? Do I stay at home and work, stay home from work? Remember, a lot of these jobs that these Alice families have, they're not work from home jobs, right? Or do I call a babysitter? Shout it out. We'll call a babysitter, a little less. So we've got that now. We've got 9:44. Of course, we talked about the irregular hours on the short notice that makes this very difficult, and how inconsistent, and the quality of child care for these families is inconsistent, and their choices are limited. So let's continue, and make sure you go home and learn more about that. So we made it to our 10-year anniversary. That's great. We haven't had a date in over a year, and mom says she's going to watch the kids. That's awesome. So what do? We're going to splurge for a night out, we're going to make a nice dinner at home, or we're going to make a card out of a piece of paper I found in the trash, and I'm going to give it to my wife, which I've done before, and I've gotten in trouble for that, by the way. Night out? Pardon? Make a nice dinner at home? All right, we'll choose that one because it's a little less, right? But when you think about that, I think everybody can attest to what's on the screen right now, right? I don't have to really go into that. So let's continue, Danielle. Thank you. So I burned my arm cooking dinner. I treated it, I do that all the time. I treated it myself, and now I think it's infected, for goodness sakes. Am I going to continue to treat it myself, or I'm going to go see a doctor and get some antibiotics? What do I do? Get the antibiotics? That's the one. Pick it. All right? We're talking about the large percentage of Alice adults that will not go to the doctor because they can't afford it, or they don't have the time, they can't get off of work. Let's continue. Okay, we're almost at another payday, I believe. Now, here's, again, the name of the exercise is making tough choices. Sometimes you have no choice to make, right? And this is one of them. My kid has to eat, it's a special formula. I have no choice but to buy that formula. Yeah. Okay. So the bus broke down on the way to work. What do? I wait for the new bus, or I walk the rest of the way to work? Shout it out. Walk. I'm going to walk. I can do that. I got my sneakers on. Got another payday. That's great. Okay? So daycare picture orders are due. You know, that great moment in our children's lives with those pictures. Which one do you pick, or do we pass? Pass on the pictures? Pass on the pictures. Okay, so the Greenwich Town Party is coming up. The fireworks at Binney Park. We've got all that going on, a lot of action. Can I get my child's face painted? Or do I say no to that and make that tough choice? You can't do that, Scott or Eric. You can't get your face painted. Which one is it? Paint the face. We'll paint the face. Okay, the good news is baby's feeling better. The bad news is I'm not. Okay? I caught it. You all, well, those of you that are parents, you know what that's like. You get that sickness. You're going to find out pretty soon. So be prepared for that. So what do? Do I call out sick? Half a shift? Or go in sick? Shout it out. I'm going to go in sick and make everybody else sick. Okay. So, gosh darn it all, I was making a can of soup and I sliced it. I have only one choice here because it's bleeding badly and I don't want to bleed to death, so I'm going to head straight to the ER. Okay, so we know about how high deductible plans are and what's available to a lot of these folks that we're talking about, this Alice population. A lot of higher out-of-pocket costs. Okay, so we chose bus routes as opposed to an automobile because we couldn't afford it. So now we don't have any choice here. We have to make this, pick this because that's it. We don't have any choice. Okay, limited public transportation, we've talked about that, and many folks without a car, maybe one car that is unreliable as well. Oh boy, landlord's not going to be happy. Okay, so do I patch it myself, or do I get it patched by a professional? Patch it myself. Okay. Okay, it's now Friday and I'm shot. I don't want to cook, I don't want to do anything. Do I go to Glenville Pizza? Do I order one? Or do I say, sorry kids, I'm going to put something together, but I'm going to skip dinner myself? Another tough choice to make, right? Another tough choice. Shout it out. Which one am I going to pick? Second one, order a pizza? Okay. Yay, another payday. And what, I can't tell what day we're on because that bar is on the bottom, but we'll see it in a minute. What a joy. Moms have offered to take the kids, give us a night out together. What do? Do we spend $40 on a movie and a popcorn? Do we get Chinese takeout and stay in? Or do we rent a movie or get a movie from the library and see what's in the fridge, scrounge around in there for something that I cooked? Shout it out. Chinese food? Okay, get Chinese food and stay in. Okay, nothing, got to go to work now, nothing in the fridge for lunch. What do? Grab some fast food, grab a quick snack, or skip lunch today? Skip lunch today, not going to eat. Okay, we'll skip lunch. Now look at that. And that's a common issue among these families right there. Very, very common issue. Those of you that have had pink eye, you know it stinks. Now both the kids recently had it and I got it. What do? Go to the walk-in clinic or take the next available doctor's appointment? Go to the walk-in clinic, okay? Deli meat spoiled. I still need lunches for 3 more days. Do I buy fresh bologna? Do I buy fresh deli turkey? Peanut butter and jelly? Peanut butter? Peanut butter it is. Okay, I need my coffee, but the coffee maker blew up. Do I grab it on the way to work? Do I buy a new coffee maker or skip the Morning Joe? How many of you are going to do that? All right. Buy a new coffee maker, okay. That's a long-term decision. That's a good one. Forgot to pack the kids' lunches. Which one do I choose there? Pay the fee for the 2 kids, $10, or turn around, get the lunches at home and go back? It's going to cost me a little more. Pay the fee? Pay the fee. Thanks, Danielle. Okay. Here's a common one. Take the ibuprofen. That's the choice. It costs nothing. Nope.
Oops, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So we chose a different one, but that's okay. So it gives you some good information. If you chose another one, it'll give you something else. But poor oral health leads to so much more, and we all know that. And in these families, again, especially. Yay, we made it to payday again. We're on day 28. You guys are doing quite well. I've done this in front of many groups, and by the day 7, 8, 9, 10 to 15, they're busted. There's no money left, and something else pops up that you can read if you do it at home with the kids.
But we are completely stressed out, right?
Yeah.
Put a price tag on that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, back's killing me, don't know how, don't know why, what do? Which one? Take a few days off or try physical PT?
Try PT.
Try PT. That's very clear that this happens a lot. If they don't go in, they don't get paid for these jobs. And as I said before, there's no work from home for many, if not all of these families. Day 29, you almost made it. Okay, so now one of your kids is, squinting at the board. Teacher tells you, what do? Eye exam, big box, or ask the teacher if he can sit closer to the front.
Big box.
Big box, okay? Take him to Costco. Okay? All right. Been craving pizza all day. You want to pick up a pie from our Curry's, or do you want to buy a frozen one?
Frozen.
We'll pick up a frozen one at $3.65. Okay. Whole Foods. So that's great. You made it. I highly recommend that you do this at home and make different choices than we did tonight, because it changes in the background, as I said. and see if you do or do not run out of money by the end of the month. But it gives you a really good idea as to the tough choices these families have to make every single day, and how lucky we are to be in this town. The generosity in this town is off the charts, quite frankly. You know, the 20,000 plus lives the Greenwich United Way touches in a positive way every year is all because of you. Most of you are probably donors, and if not, I'm happy to chat with you and tell you why you should be, of course. But the programs and grants that we make, we focus on Alice, we focus on the federal poverty level folks, and if you have any questions, of course, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle.
Danielle, thank you.
Thank you for coming out this evening. I'd like to say that we appreciate you taking the time. And everything that you've heard today, I really want to focus in and talk about the social determinants of health. We've heard about the tough choices that have to be made. We've heard about the wealth disparities, but let's talk about how it can impact our residents and looking at those health consequences. So first, I'm just going to go through and explain what some of the key social determinants of health are so we can ensure that we all understand. So the CDC and also the Health and Human Services Department lets us know that the 5 domains of the social determinants of health are economic stability, and also education and access and quality, health care access and quality, neighborhood and built environment, and social and community context. So when we take that first domain, when we look at economic stability, what does that mean? You know, intuitively, I think we all understand what that means. But when we're thinking about, for me, you know, at the Department of Human Services, the clients that we serve, how is that defined? So we're looking at someone that has steady employment, we hope, or not even just steady employment, but adequate employment. You know, we've heard about the limit in terms of the Alice threshold. And someone may have steady employment, but they may not be employed to the point where they can meet their basic needs. And then for those individuals that are unable to be employed, do they have the benefits that they need that they can also meet their needs? And think about those folks that are underemployed, do they have those supplemental benefits so that they can function? And we think about food security. You know, many of our panelists tonight mentioned some of the resources that are available in our community to meet that need. And then we also think about housing stability and each and everything related to economics, the amount of salary that you have, what needs are, what unexpected issues occur, and how that can impact how you live from day to day. And in the second domain, we have education access and quality. So that can be defined as supporting students' success in school, enrollment in higher education, when we look at the information that Steve presented, also early childhood education and development, and language literacy. And again, these are just examples. There is a whole list of information that impacts and relates to this particular domain and each and every domain that we will go through. So when we look at healthcare access and quality, we're looking at access to high quality healthcare. And I would take that qualifier of high quality and really put it in front of every single area that I'm speaking about here. So access to high quality primary care. No one wants to go to a doctor or physician, you know, where they don't believe that their needs are going to be met, where they're not going to walk out healthier than when they came in. So we're looking at high quality. Adequate health insurance coverage. We know that not everyone can afford to buy health insurance, to pay for health insurance. So we want to ensure that those individuals, those residents that may need to utilize Husky, that there are quality health care providers and mental health care providers that are out there, and there is access to those services. We know that there are delays, there are wait lists associated with that, and you know, part of what I'll talk about a little bit later is how can we expedite, you know, someone getting connected to the care that they need. And then we look at health literacy, ensuring that our residents understand what it means to be healthy, right? Understand the questions that they should be asking when they're at the doctor. And being able to take that information and having the resources so they can implement it in their lives in an effective way. And then we look at neighborhood and built environment. And some of the points related to that are quality of housing, access to transportation. Transportation has come up several times, with our different panelists. The availability of healthy foods, so not just foods. When we were talking about making tough choices, not eating. I don't know about you, but if I didn't eat today, I wouldn't be functioning today. I wouldn't be able to formulate a sentence, so that impacts your ability to perform. And then think about that. Someone begins to underperform at work because they're not able to eat properly, and then guess what? They lose their job. And then they no longer have the funds necessary to meet all of their other needs. Air and water quality, and neighborhood crime and violence. And when we look at social and community context, some of the areas that we're focusing on here are cohesion within a community, the community's ability to come together, work together, to converse, to speak, to find out what the needs are, and then to work on those needs, right? To be able to address them appropriately. Civic participation. I think Fred, when he spoke earlier, he spoke about, Greenwich being just extremely involved in terms of the residents wanting to help and be there for one another. Lack of discrimination, and then also conditions in the workplace. So a lot of this information in this slide and the slides before were taken from the Health and Human Services website. You can feel free to look up that information, and also from the cdc.gov. It can give you additional information about the social determinants of health. So when we look at Greenwich and we look at what types of services and assistance are available here, when Mehmet talked about how do we transform, how do we make the changes to the point where we're decreasing that wealth disparity. So some of the services that are available are vocational educational programs and when I mention all of these, some of them are available directly through our department, the Department of Human Services, and many of them are not, but we coordinate with community partners, agencies within the community, with many people that are represented here to ensure those services are provided. And trust me, this is not an exhaustive list, it's just an example of some of the services that are available. So vocational educational programs, we know during the pandemic, we may have had folks, individuals that we worked with that unfortunately, based on the type of work that they were doing, let's say if someone was working in a restaurant, that restaurant closed. And guess what? For a while there, many of the restaurants were closed, or they were only doing takeout. They no longer needed servers. So then we had residents that needed some training so they can become employed, right? Because their benefits will only last for so long. So we look at job training also. We look at case management services. We have that here in Greenwich. We have it in our department. We have it in some of our agencies that we partner with, especially. You don't have to come to our department. I know that sometimes there's a lot of stigma associated with that. There are other agencies that are available. And what I want to do, and I hope that I'll be able to do, is decrease the amount of stigma associated with asking for help. Because we are here. This is what we are here for. This is the nature of what we do. My life's purpose is to help others. And it's why I do what I do and why my staff also does it. Early childhood development programs exist. And of course, we know there's always additional ones. And there was also, we mentioned child care services. We're always looking for opportunities to increase what's there. But these are some of the services that are. Mentoring programs for teens, leadership development opportunities for youth, access to quality mental health, addiction, and medical services that accept Husky. All right, that was key. At first, I put that bullet in, and I was like, you know what, I got to go back. And I have to think about the population that we serve in my department and make sure that they are included in this statement. Temporary financial assistance is available, not only through our department, but also through other community agencies. And then understanding that someone may need those emergency funds because of the flat tire, because of something happening, but then helping them to develop a plan so that they have ongoing support. And then working to increase affordable housing. That is a larger discussion, but we are beginning it, right? And we are working on it and working towards it. And just to give you a quick view in terms of who or how many people we treat, we assist within our department. So in FY 2021, we had 1,815 households that we provided support and assistance to, and that was approximately 4,092 individuals. Now, fast forward 1 year, FY 2022, that increased to 2,100 households, and which equaled for us 4,588 individuals. So again, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I know we're going to have some questions, but this is an important discussion, and I thank you for everyone that came out here to take the time and discuss this, and this is only the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, and Fred, who had to move on. I don't know if you all are aware just how much Demetria has accomplished in her 2 years as the Commissioner of the Department of Human Services here in Greenwich. You know, she arrived in August of 2020, okay? 5 months into COVID, taking on, a big department in the town of Greenwich. And you heard Fred say it. He's on the phone with her repeatedly, and her pretty strong response is, I'm on it, or I got it, or whatever Fred said. And I've heard that at many of the other organizations around town, because you're kind of the quarterback for so many of those organizations, large and small, that would come in and say, we got this problem, let's get together and figure it out. Whether it's, Gabby, Margaret, Family Centers hasn't been mentioned much. Danielle does a lot of youth work in the Department of Human Services and with others around town. Obviously, the schools, especially the private schools, in addition to all of the public school activity. So, Demetria, hats off to you for all that you've accomplished in these just a couple of years. So there were only a couple or three questions that were posed via emails, and they were kind of, I thought, rather narrow and personal. I mean, what's the town going to do to take on transportation issues? I wonder if any of you all here tonight have some questions on your mind that you might pose to the panelists. Just to take the next 10 or so minutes to wind up here.
Okay, great. Yes, so there are different thresholds to qualify for services. They can access it directly through us as a department, or we've been. What does that mean? Okay. Through the town. So there's a couple things. So for the Greenwich Department of Human Services, you can give us a call, you can send us an email, then we'll have an intake worker reach out to you. You can actually do a walk-in. We're open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, and then we'll follow up with you. We'll do an assessment of what your financial situation is, what your level of need is, and sometimes someone may come in and they may not be eligible for direct financial services from us, but there may be other programs that they're eligible for. And one thing that I did forget to mention is through the Arpa funding, in order to kind of close the gap and address those issues related to the folks that are between the federal poverty level, or for us, our marker is 300% of the federal poverty level and the ALICE threshold, we requested funds, an additional $50,000 each year for the next 3 years to assist folks that are between 300% of the federal poverty level and the ALICE threshold to assist them with some of their essential needs, which may be rent. If someone, we've had instances where someone, because they did have their car that broke down and that car was their mode of transportation for work, and the ripple effect of not having access to that would be significant, then that would be the type of request that we would, look into. So, and I'm so sorry if I didn't answer. Okay.
I think there was there we go.
Yes, that's a great point. We actually do have, for many of our programs that we provide, if someone is eligible, let's say for renter's rebate or for operation fuel, we will actually go out to a residence, we'll go to some of the housing complexes and we'll schedule a day. We'll make sure that all the residents know about it and they'll come down to the community room. Like during COVID, many of the community rooms were closed, but we had access to them for that reason.
Are you familiar with TAG, the Transportation Association here in Greenwich? Having volunteered a lot for Neighbor to Neighbor and packing food for the last couple of years during the pandemic, TAG 5 days a week was picking up that food and delivering, hundreds and hundreds of bags a day. So, and then if I understand TAG correctly, they also can provide more individualized transportation to get people to doctor's appointments and things like that. So that's one good, I think, resource on the transportation front.
But what I was going to say, I think, Demetria, you are the screening agency for Neighbor to Neighbor as well. So there is a referral process automatically going on in that process.
I could put in a personal plug for an organization I happen to be on the board of, which is Building One Community over in Stamford. B1C does a really terrific job, and you can see it on their website in their annual report, of toting up that number. But I feel like I've seen it in a couple of organizations here in Greenwich, but which ones isn't coming to mind? Any of you all?
Having been a banker for well too long, it's not going to be an easy answer because you have capital in terms of, like, Neighbor to Neighbor just built a new building, right? 30 million, 35, I'm not even sure where the... Neighbor to Neighbor?
Yeah.
The building itself was 5? Okay. So Neighbor to Neighbor was 5. The Boys and Girls Club is under a project for a new build. So there's capital, and then there's the operating budgets that they have from the donations, and then there's evaluation of the volunteer time. So they're probably not super hard to get to, but those are the wraparound. It's how many hours of volunteer time, what's your operating budget, because that's spent in benefit of the community, and then the physical, right? But it's...
No, it would be a big number.
Yeah.
That I can tell you. It would be a very large number in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
The specific numbers I don't have at the top of my head, especially as I'm retired and I was out of town for 2 months. But I could certainly find out and kind of get that word around, or take a look at the B1C website. Let's have 2 more questions and call it a night. Ma'am?
And we are in the process, our department, so I can answer that, but it'll be a sort of a general answer. We're in the process right now of meeting with our community partners that have submitted their RFP requests for funding from the department. So we've had recent contact with a lot of our partners. And what we're hearing is that some of them are at capacity. Some understand, because of the ebb and flow of admissions, that they will be at capacity relatively soon. I think it's very dependent on the type of service that's being provided. And what's important, especially when we think about mental health concerns, because I know that is increasing for us, here and everywhere, that there are programs that are being developed and created where it is, programs are acting as a gap, in a way to provide temporary and interim services and also decrease the wait time. And I know that you actually are specifically working on one, and not to keep on mentioning ARPA funds, but I will do it one more time. Related to the ARPA funds, the Department of Human Services also requested funds to provide annual funding for 3 years for increasing mental health and addiction-related services. So we have specific projects that we're funding that is going to shorten wait time for certain populations. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. To that end about mental health, the needs assessment, the Greenwich United Way uses it as our strategic blueprint. You know, the top 3 needs we uncovered. So we uncover unmet needs, raise awareness and support, and develop lasting solutions for 90 years. And we've done that. You can look at our website and see all the familiar programs and agencies that we have had a hand in starting at one point or another. But mental health was one of the youth and adolescent mental health. If anyone in this room has not read about that in the last couple of years, raise your hand. I don't expect one hand to go up. Right? We are in touch with everybody about this, every stakeholder in the field, and Sergeant Brent Reeves, who handles it for the Greenwich Police Department, from 2 school years ago to this past school year, there's a 60% increase in students threatening self-harm. That's significant. The number 2 and number 3 cause of death in the state of Connecticut is suicide for children ages, and I don't have the date, but it's like from 12 to 20, let's say. I can't remember. It breaks out the second and or third leading cause of death in those 2 groups of ages. It's broken out. Is suicide. So to that end, we uncovered that mental health is an issue, no surprise, and we are partnering with Greenwich Hospital. There's no IOP in the town of Greenwich, intensive outpatient program. So a youth and adolescent mental health program, IOP, is going to be started with Greenwich Hospital, Yale New Haven, and the Greenwich United Way. We have the location picked out. We're fundraising now, and we're going to start it. It's pretty groundbreaking, and we are completely positive. We don't make a lot of guarantees, but I know we're going to stop a lot of tears from being shed, and we're going to save some lives, I'm sure.
Maybe one last question?
I was just going
Oops, sorry,
to follow
Steve.
through on the answer of unmet needs. If you looked at the income distribution from 1940 till today and assets, et cetera, and you look at where we are now in terms of cost of living and housing, the stress levels and the needs are soaring.
Yeah.
So they're across all, I mean, if you think of the domestic stress on the parents, you think about the children, the insecurity, and evictions and movement. I mean, the society is under tremendous stress now. Just defending your existing socioeconomic position, which is being eroded. The stress levels and the needs are not going down, they're going up.
My question was more about coordination and, always, I like a chamber of commerce, but always wanted a chamber of nonprofits. Coordination of efforts.
Oh, I think there's the coordination I think has been very good, but I think the need, I guess the point that when you talked about it, like, are we meeting their needs as well? I mean, that was part of that. As I understood, I think there's a question of their needs are going to grow tremendously. It's going to be tough to keep up with it for all this.
Thanks, Steve. Part of the role, as Mehmet was looking at me to chat, part of the role of the Greenwich United Way is to be the convener. And that's what we've done over the past 90 years, is bring the nonprofits together, bring the key stakeholders together, which we do every quarter. All the CEOs come together at our office and we chat about what's going on, what do they need, what best practices are. Sometimes we'll bring a speaker in, things related to even running the business that everyone's in, like
Are those public?
Barbara's house has.
Are your results public?
They could be public. I mean, we're transparent through press releases and things. I don't know if anyone reads any of this stuff, but we do push it out through social and press. So we do push all this out. And is Mary Lee still here from the YW? Did she leave? So one of the things that came up is accounting to try and save money, because if nonprofits can save money by partnering together with back office operations, we can save a lot of money that way. So we have a speaker coming in October for the CEO Roundtable, we call it, to try and save money in the back office, right? So to consolidate operations, which is a no-brainer almost, right? So things like that are a lot of stuff, Kristen, is going on in the background, and the Greenwich United Way brings those, convenes all that. That's what we do. That's part of our role.
Just another, yes, there are so many examples of how the organizations in this town collaborate, meet, converse. David said, if you see any feed, any hard print newspaper, and every week there are stories about agencies in Greenwich collaborating in new and different ways, responding to particular crises. And if one were to look at the Department of Human Services website and look into needs for immigrants, frankly, the go-to organization to a large degree is Building One Community, because it's up and running. And that's one thing that I think in both Greenwich and Stamford over the 10 plus years I've spent in this area, the coordination, I mean, some of those mental health services, I think about Laurel House over in Stamford. You know, they'll be very specific about who's got the best skills to deal with certain issues. And so I just think that that's also a very important function between Greenwich and Stamford as well. So maybe on that note, we thank our panelists one last time. And safe home, everybody.